Hello, welcome to the Week 5 review show. Can we believe that is already Week 5? We're going into the books. I definitely can't. We have a lot of stories this week, including the top two teams in college football really separating themselves from everybody else. I mean, it was a completely dominant performance. We're waiting on the SEC championship game. We're waiting on the playoff. Those two teams playing each other will define their seasons, not really anybody else, as long as they don't slip up. But the best of both of those teams appeared this weekend. It was also a major day for rankings upset. Oregon went down. Wake had a good game. BC had a good game. Michigan won. We'll get to them in a little bit. Arkansas is a top 10 team lost. Oregon lost. Ole Miss lost. Several teams. Oklahoma looked okay. Baylor lost. Florida, another top 10 team, went down. North Carolina State struggled with Louisiana Tech. Texas A&M went down to Mississippi State. It was just one of those weird upset-laden weekends. And I hope everybody enjoyed it because we wanted drama, we wanted excitement, and that is exactly what we got. But I want to talk a little bit at the top that there really is two college football teams competing for the best, and then the rest is, just everybody else. It could almost be a top 2 playoff ranking at this point. But Georgia number 1, Alabama number 2. We're going to get to that in just a second with the playoff rankings because there's some interesting stuff. And I do think that other than the top of the SEC, which are those two teams, the Big Ten is just kind of creeping up. Now, they're going to separate. Iowa and Penn State are about to play. Michigan has those teams, I believe. Michigan still has Ohio State. Ohio State's still laying in the weeds that they could get back into this. So it'll be interesting to see. But right now, the Big Ten is making a push. And also, Cincinnati booked their ticket. As long as they win the rest of their conference games, they booked their ticket into the playoff. They absolutely did, beating Notre Dame at Notre Dame. That is a top 10 win, no matter how you spin it. Cincinnati has proved they belong. They've beaten Indiana this year. They just keep taking care of business. And people are going to try and find a reason to shoot holes into a group of 5 school being here for the playoffs. They absolutely deserve a position if they win the rest of their games. They played the schedule. They've beaten the schedule. They're a really good football team. They really are. And I think Luke Fickell is probably a leader this year to go from Cincinnati to one of the, quote, blue bloods. Now, we thought it might have been Michigan, even though it was an Ohio State guy, but Michigan is starting quietly to have an identity. They're playing really hardball ball, and they're just pounding people. They're just muscling and bullying people around. And that is interesting to see because, they may or may not make it into the playoff rankings this week. Georgia, unbelievably impressive. No starting quarterback. It didn't matter. 37-0 win over Arkansas. Arkansas missed a field goal, but, this is a Georgia defense that has played 2 top 10 games. 2 top 10 games, and they're averaging giving up 3 points a game. Alabama performed at their absolute top level. They knew going into this game they had to be on the ball, let their talent show everything that was in place. They actually did that. Did anybody question really whether Nick Saban would be able to get these guys up? But Ole Miss needed to see where they stood against a team like Alabama playing their best. Not a team like Alabama like last year where they didn't necessarily play their best. Or a team like Alabama 2 years ago that was blowing Ole Miss off the field. No, they needed to see this year when this game actually had Alabama's attention. And it resulted in a game that Lane Kiffin kind of let get away for him in the second quarter. 2 quick touchdowns going forward on his own 30 or 40-yard line, followed by a fumble that Alabama punched in short fields. I told you earlier in the week, Ole Miss absolutely had to play clean, and a missed 4th down conversion would be considered not playing clean. They dropped a touchdown pass. They got stopped on 4th and 1 from the 6-yard line. Ole Miss could have been in this game if they would have played perfect. They did not play perfect, and because of that, the talent of athlete that Alabama possessed absolutely took over. They dominated the line of scrimmage, which they could. There's 5 stars all over the field, but it's a game where Ole Miss can measure themselves against the gold standard. Alabama, where they are now, is where you're trying to get to. And the only way to see what that separation is to see Alabama at its best. We saw Alabama at its best. It was a 21-point victory for the Tide. So I'm actually taking a ton of hope from this as recruiting builds up for these guys over time. Because you can see in the second half, once the offense woke up a little bit, they were able to move the ball and do the things that they were supposed to do. They couldn't do it in the first half. They got a little bit shook, a little bit panicked. The moment was a little bit too big. These guys, remember, have not played in front of a crowd like that since 2019. And that's the first time Matt Corral has ever played at Bryant-Denny Stadium. So it's understandable that they came out a little shook, the environment. The moment, I don't think, was too big for them. That's a key distinction. I don't think it was a situation where playing Alabama like that, it was too big for them. I think the exterior stuff got to them a little bit. The crowd got to them a little bit. They didn't play particularly clean. They didn't keep their poise at times on the field. And that includes the head man, Lane Kiffin, which allowed that game to kind of get away from them. Now, did Ole Miss expect to win that game? No, they didn't. They were a 15-point underdog for a reason. They were a 15-point underdog for a reason, and you can't really take anything away from Alabama. Now, what Ole Miss did need to happen and what inevitably did happen was to get Alabama's attention, to poke the bear, to see exactly what they had. You didn't, like I said, you didn't want to see where you stood against Alabama when they were overlooking Ole Miss. You wanted to see where you stood with Alabama giving you their absolute best. Coaching, playing, the attention of everybody. And believe you me, we had their attention. Now, Alabama won the game. Alabama was supposed to win the game. They're the number one team playing at home. They were a 15-point favorite. I mean, it's not hard. They won by 21. It's not. Let's not take this for anything other than what it was. But it shows us where we need to get to. It shows us that we aren't far. We came into this game kind of thinking, because of media hype and everybody going on trying to be the smartest person in the room, that this was 2014. But this game played out like 2013. If you go back and think about the game, Hugh Freeze went for several first downs and didn't get it, ended up losing the game like 25-0 or something like that. This played out like 2013. So take heart, Rebel fans. You will be able to bounce back from that game, and there's a lot of positives that you can take from it as well. So I'm pretty happy about that. Let's look at the playoff ranking for the week. We've got Georgia at number 1. Georgia's just dominant, just absolutely dominant at this point, giving up 3 points a game through like 5 games, and they have played 2 top 10 opponents. Now, I'm not saying they're in the top 10 in college football, but they were ranked in the top 10 at the time they played. And this is a special group, and this is without JT Daniels for 2 of those games. It's impressive. It's a good football team. And Jordan Davis is just a manimal on the defensive line. Number 2, Alabama, great team. Absolutely. My opinion is Georgia at this point is a little better. Alabama is a great team. It's the top 1 and 2, and then everybody else in college football at this point. That's just the way it is. Number 3, Cincinnati. If they win the rest of their games, they deserve to be in the playoff. If they get left out of the playoffs, it is a travesty. They deserve to be there. They've beaten everybody on their schedule, and they should be very happy with where they're sitting. Iowa at number 4, just absolutely boat race Maryland. And, Tagovailoa got benched. Coach Loxley has a little bit of work to do with there, but Iowa just has built a little bit of a ground and pound, but they've got a big game, I think, this weekend against number 5, Penn State. So it'll be like a Big Ten separation Saturday, to where the loser of this team is just basically out of the playoffs, and you'll never see them again this season, and the winner will do a little bit to kind of put themselves in there in a more permanent basis. But Do I think these teams can go undefeated at this point, starting with number 4? No. I think there's a chance Ohio State gets back up and gets in there. I think there's a chance that Oklahoma ends up back in there at 4. But as it sits right now, these are the top 6. And Michigan comes in at number 6. They're not ranked there. They're playing like number 6. Of all the teams, this season, no matter what you do, no matter what you think of, the rankings this season in the preseason were criminally wrong. If anything, COVID exposed the fact that lazy takes cannot survive. So if you wanted to move 2019 on to 2021, it just didn't work. It never worked, and all these teams fell less and less and less important. And now all of a sudden they're playing catch up. It's like, hey, who needs to be here? I wouldn't be surprised if Kentucky enters the top 25 at like rank 12 after their win over Florida. So it's just a mess. I don't know if I would pay attention to polls at this point. I would pay attention to the playoff rankings, but we're still a month away from them. But I'm trying to do this regardless, of preseason rankings and everything's going on. And I've been very patient with teams. If they barely win a game, it takes a lot for them to move out of the poll if they were a good team and they're undefeated. But Oklahoma started out at I think they were number 1. Starting in the preseason, in my opinion, because I thought they were the best team in college football, and they have fallen and fallen and fallen. They're like 7th, 8th, or 9th right now in the playoff rankings, and they haven't lost a game. That's what is impressive. But this has been the College Football Review Show. Thank you very much for tuning in. We'll be back with the Palmcast tomorrow at 10 o'clock. Tomorrow night, Beast of the East. And Tuesday, Best of the West. Wednesday, SEC After the Dark, where I will pay off my bet with Cassidy Thomas in the Ole Miss Alabama game. So it's going to be a nice little houndstooth background, everybody, doing SEC After Dark. So I'm looking forward to that. Thursday, we're going to, right now, tentatively, we're planning on doing a live stream preview just like we did last week, but this time with Kevin Bohannon and the Hog Talk podcast or Hog Sports podcast. Bring those guys in and we'll talk a little football on that side of the equation, getting you ready for this week. Because remember, there's no bye weeks now. It's time to go. It's all gas from here to the finish line. But thanks for tuning in. We almost doubled up our numbers for record-breaking September. Thank you very much for watching, for listening, and all of that stuff. And I just want to tell you, of course, hotty toddy.